Okay, so this is the Letterboxd recap for February of 2025. Um, First up, on the 1st, I did finally watch a film from last year, 2024. This was Robot Dreams, which is an animated film I had heard about. It got a surprise nomination last year at the Academy Awards for Best Animated Film. And I knew nothing about it other than the fact it was about a dog who is lonely. And so he orders a robot. And he wants to build a robot to hang out with. And that alone is enough of an idea for me to want to see it. But what it is much deeper and much more mature than a movie about a dog building a robot ever really should be or needs to be. It's just allegory for a breakup. It could be any kind of relationship you want. It could be friends. It could be like a romantic relationship. The point is, it shows the progression extremely well from both sides, really. It's the robot is kind of the innocent person in this, just a decent robot. And the dog goes through all the emotions of like being really excited and being really interested in a relationship at first, and then kind of sours a little bit, or it becomes difficult for him. And so, while he doesn't necessarily give up or forget, he kind of uses it to reprocess himself. And the robot is stuck isolated and wondering what life would be like with the dog. So these much deeper, much more sophisticated than you would think, but good and surprisingly sad at times as well. And I thought fair to both sides too, because you can pin this against any kind of relationship you've seen if you haven't had one. But if you've had one, you can see the beats here, and they mirror it pretty good. Coupled up with the ending, which is also kind of like, lessons learned, without telling too many obvious things with it. It's like they're now both kind of new 100% in their own right, and they go forward. I'm not going to ruin it by telling you they don't die there, I guess, but they learn their lessons, and they're richer for it. And there's kind of like a smile and nod. I saw it described as La La Land with a robot and a dog, and that's not totally wrong. I think it's better than La La Land, though, because it is subtle, it is very emotional, but it's what you bring to it too, because there's no dialogue in the movie at all. Nobody talks. Robot doesn't talk, dog doesn't talk, nobody talks. So it's up to you to relate to these moments and fill in the blanks with the emotion. If you do, then it's going to hit a little harder. If you don't, you can still watch it and kind of learn things from it too, because you can see the beats through it. And it's better than like a Disney princess story where they tell you, oh yeah, here's your prince, go find him, and then, oh, this is the only answer for you. No, this is a much more realistic approach, set in the real world, in the time frame in the 80s, on purpose to show you, no, this is grounded in reality. Dog, robot, but look at the real life we're living. So good, smart, interesting, and simply made. But I think again that matters, because you should relate to it whether you're 5 or 85. It's just a good movie. Okay, next up is Sorceress, which I watched on February 2nd. This is from 1995, directed by Jim Wynorski. And the important thing that I learned about Sorceress is that it's like a softcore porno, which I didn't really know going into it. It's fine that it is. I wasn't watching it in a nursing home or in a third grade class or something. It was just me. But I did not know what it was, because I looked at the cast, and the cast is Julie Strain and Linda Blair and Michael Parks. So I looked at that, and the last thing I thought was like erotic thriller, but it is. I'm not super familiar with Jim Wynorski's work. I guess that's maybe my problem. I've seen Deathstalker 2, and that has its moments of silly, but I wouldn't call that like erotic. And this has moments of it, especially the beginning. It just kind of tacks on sex scenes because there's moments where the main character is reminiscing about his ex, and his memories just all happen to be elongated scenes of hardcore sex. And that's, I guess, if that's what you shared, that's what you remember. But that's not a problem that it happens to be that. It's maybe one of its more endearing qualities too. It's just I have a certain expectation when I'm going to sit down and watch that. I looked at this and I saw the poster and I was like, oh, horror movie. And it kind of is, but it's really, you would put it in the erotic thriller camp over a horror movie any day because there's way more of that. And it's kind of like really brightly lit. It's really exaggerated scenes and mannerisms. Michael Parks is in, I think, 3 scenes completely. He has one scene where he speaks in it, and he's pouring his heart out in it. But at the same time, it's just kind of like his character could have been edited out of the movie, and you wouldn't really notice. He's doing a whole other thing in the movie besides anybody else. And it is interesting. It is complex in a weird way, too. It's kind of about like witchcraft and possessing another person and controlling their thoughts and making somebody a surrogate for you and controlling them from afar and sabotaging their life. It's clever with its ideology. It's shot well for cheap. There's some decent shots in there that make sense. I kind of like the effect where they want to simulate gunshots and they don't really have a way to do it, so they just flick the lights off and on. It works in the scene like that, and it has a nice heart to it. It's not overtly sleazy, even though it has these elongated sex scenes to it. It feels like it has a decent heart. It feels like everybody was kind of on board with it. They understood the assignment, and they walked in and they said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to shoot this, we're going to have fun doing it, and we're going to tell a story. And it's good. It's good because of that. Because again, I didn't watch this with any kind of like knowledge or intent of watching a Skinamax film. But once you're in it, you're in it. And so now I have to just watch it for the plot, for real. And I did. And I stuck around. And it was good. It was well made for what it was. It doesn't kind of outpunch its weight class, but it's still good. It's a good, solid entry in the kind of the witchcraft genre. There's not a ton of movies in that genre that I've seen. So because of that, because of the cast, because of the tone of it, it works. It's good. Okay, next is After Midnight, which is not the CBS show hosted by Taylor Tomlinson. This is a 2019 film directed by a pair of filmmakers. There's Christian Stella and Jeremy Gardner. And this was terrible. I thought this was mostly a drama. It's a relationship drama about a couple who just kind of are going in different directions in life. He wants to stay in the country, and she apparently wants more. She disappears at the beginning of the movie and comes back kind of in the third act to have a long monologue, which is the highlight of the film. But it's her telling him things like, oh, I need culture, and I need diamonds, and I need to eat sushi, and all these kind of things that a clueless guy writes thinking a woman feels, because women be shopping type of ideology. And so she delivers this monologue, and it's good. It's a good monologue, but a lot of the words are clunky and painful and out of character and tone deaf. And the entire thing revolves around the male character, which seems a little self-indulgent because it's also Jeremy Gardner. He wrote himself the lead of his movie, so the entire movie is him. And as soon as the girlfriend disappears, now a monster is terrorizing his property, or a wolf, or whatever he thinks it is. So he sits on his porch all day with a shotgun, waiting for this wolf to come and tear his doors apart and terrorize his house in the middle of the night. And I think you're supposed to think the entire time that the girlfriend has just disappeared because she can't deal with being this monster, and so that's her attacking. But no, it's just a gigantic metaphor. The entire movie is a gigantic metaphor for this guy's inability to commit to her. That, I guess it's his fears, his fears of losing his self are manifested into a weird-looking kooshball monster who you see for approximately 30 seconds in the entirety of the film. And that's okay. All of the ideology here is fine. It's been done before. It's been done before better, though. And this is stupid on multiple levels because it's this manifestation that has come forth, and then he literally beats it to death and then, like, asks for marriage in the same movement. It's all just a giant on-the-nose manifestation of his inability to commit to a relationship. But the million-dollar question is, why the fuck should I care about this guy's inability to commit to anything? I don't know who he is. I don't care. And the movie just has him as a stoic man who is moping around in his house. And then when the girl finally comes back in her big fat monologue, he just tears her apart and says, "Oh, you left, and you need diamonds, and I'm a country boy." And he stomps away in a big huff. But I guess the big bow is that, he realizes she does like her and is going to marry her. Wow, what a saint. Like, this is totally one-sided and totally opposite of any kind of sentimentality that the woman would actually want to see. It's why did this woman even come back to begin with? I guess because her shirts were there? There's no narrative reason why she came back to this guy. Because in this giant monologue, she tells him everything that he ain't, that she wants and desires. And yet here she is. And so now the great thing that's supposed to make her happy and tie everything up is that he's going to compromise and marry her. They're just going to get divorced in 6 minutes because they don't belong together. This is a disaster of a relationship and an extremely short-sighted and selfish viewpoint of one, completely from this guy's perspective. Very vain, very boring, and no horror in it whatsoever. Because even though there's a monster that's attacking him, A, it's a metaphor, and B, you see it for less than a minute. So this is just stupid and a waste of time. Next is 2019's Sweetheart, which starts out great. It starts out really powerful, really simple, and beautiful. It's shot on location, on a beach. You can't buy those production values. It's a picturesque, beautiful beach with a sole character. She's a survivor of a shipwreck, and it's Kiersey Clements playing this role. So it's one woman on a beach, so it's kind of Castaway style, where she's running around trying to figure out what happened. Did anybody survive? What do I have to work with? What do I do to go forward? And so for the first whole act, that's all it is. And it's just kind of like, how is this woman going to learn how to survive? And it can go anywhere after that. And I think that's great. It's a nice setup. It's well, again, looks great and well executed. But then, of course, there's a monster that emerges from the bottom of the ocean periodically from a black hole. And he'll come out and he'll poke around and he'll drag stuff down there, usually people. Because if he finds any surviving bodies or anything else, he wants to drag it down there. What's his goal? I don't know. He lives there, I guess. And he's bored or hungry or both. And he just wants to drag you down with him. So it's going along fine. That's plenty. That's kind of all you need for a movie. And then kind of act 2, they introduce more people. There's more people that show up, and then it just kind of slowly falls off the rails. It does rebound in the third act, but the whole second act is just a mess. It doesn't need to exist. And I can tell now from watching it why the movie's called Sweetheart. This is where you learn the titular reason of why it's called Sweetheart. There's a whole subplot in there about her character, being independent and having to learn how to care for herself and what's she going to do and what is she worth. And I get that that's the backbone of what we're showing here, but that all works without some other character showing up and telling me that. I know it. I'm watching her do it. I don't care what her backstory was. They don't give you more than that guy's rant about it. So it's not like it's really important. And it's there, and I feel like it distracts from the whole rest of the movie. It takes away from her story. It doesn't make it better. It doesn't make her more empowered. It just kind of gives them things to do. And it seems more padded out. I would have liked to see instead just a total single survival story. Just her plotting other ways to get this monster, maybe failing, trying to escape, maybe failing. That would have been more interesting than this. This whole veer off into random other people takes it down considerably to me. As in the case with most things, people ruin everything. When people show up to something, then it's a fucking mess. So never more illustrated as the heart of society than here with Sweetheart. Because it starts out great, ends pretty good, but it's just a mess in the middle. But that's all now I can think of. I can't think of the great beginning. I can't think of the wrap up. I can think of a recovery. But that makes it very middle of the road to me because it's not a satisfying experience overall. And that's a damn shame. Because again, looks beautiful. It's a really nice individual performance, but spread out way too much and spread out amongst far too many people that don't matter. Okay, next is My Animal from 2023, which I watched on February 7th. This is a Canadian werewolf lesbian romance film, and a good one. It has a lot of hormones kicking around in it. It's from director Jacqueline Castel, who comes from a music video background, and it does feel like it because there's a lot of quick cuts. There's a lot of really nice lighting in it. There's a lot of moments here that are connecting. The movie is kind of a series of moments because it's a character study. It's a character study about one person who is growing up, but then at the same time has a curse of being a goddamn werewolf on their head. So what do you do with that? Well, you soldier forward and you do your best is what you do. And so there's a lot of starting, stopping. There's a lot of hesitancy going on in it. It really is a romance. It's not like a horror movie with some romance in it. This is genuinely a romance that just happens to have an occult monster as one of the people. So it's not a true horror, but at the same time it is, because that's the backbone of a lot of horror stories. And it's good, but I think it's better as a romance than it is as a horror, because the feeling you should get watching this isn't disgust or unease or feeling uncomfortable. You should feel great empathy for this character because they are trying to just have human traits and human feelings, and they do, but at the same time there's a pretty big roadblock that they're not going to overcome no matter what you do. And it's good. It's good because it made me care, it made me feel that, and it made me want to see it end happily. Does it? I don't know. Watch the goddamn movie. But I did enjoy it. It's a great looking movie, and again, it's dripping in that emotion. It really captures it well, better than a lot of uh, romance stories, because this one does not feel typical. Not just the werewolf part. There's a lot of stuff in there that feels authentic because it's clumsy and awkward and weird and doesn't work, or people just change their minds in the middle of things. And it doesn't feel like a gimmick. And it doesn't feel like a trick. It's like, oh, I wrote myself into a corner. Never mind. No, this feels very natural because this is how people act. It feels very genuine with it. And for that, it's really good to watch. Again, not a horror. If you're sitting down wanting to watch people die for whatever reason, this probably isn't the best for it. But if you're the opposite, if you want to feel a feeling of a reason for people should live in a horror movie, then this is probably the movie for you. Next up was Heart Eyes on the 8th of February, and it's a comedy. There's no bones about it. It's not even a slight comedy. It's not a horror comedy. This is a comedy that takes the piss out of holiday slashers a little bit. But it's got jokes and gags in it that are like out of a fucking Zucker Brothers movie. Like, this is ridiculous for some of it. A dildo is thrown in the face of a killer in this. I'll tell you that right now. And for what it is, it feels very much in the family of like Happy Death Day or Freaky or Totally Killer, like these recent horror movies that are very silly. And there's nothing wrong with having a funny horror movie. They can be scary and thrilling too. And this one has its moments. It's right bang in the middle in terms of where it goes, I would say. And I would say it's much more of a comedy than a horror. You wouldn't put this on to like, oh, I'm going to put this on to really scare you. Like, that's not what this is about at all. It's first and foremost a satire on romantic comedies, with the big goof being that, oh, what if we were in a romantic comedy and then we were getting stalked by a killer? What would we do? Well, one of the things we do is we try to tell them that we're not a couple because they're target couples. So there's a lot of that, a lot of gags like that, a lot of running around, and a lot of cat and mouse too, because it also wants to be a whodunit. So it plays that up. But I have no real issue with how they explain who it is, but there's no finite traits as to this killer. Like, they don't even attempt to make the killer seem important on its own, or like the movie would stand alone as a movie without this satire, because it exists as a satire. But you could do it as, oh, look at this cool idea for this killer amongst a satire. But they didn't do that. It's almost like, oh, we're going to put the laziest effort forward, like this lame-ass killer, because the satire is what matters. And that's true. That's true to this point. But at the same time, you're never going to watch this and be like, oh, yeah, this is so cool on its own. Like, you're either laughing or you hate it. It's not going to be something where you watch it, and if you don't get the satire for whatever reason, you're not going to be like, oh, yeah, awesome. And the way they explain the killers' identities and their motives and stuff, it's like a third grade class giving a book report. They tell you every beat. It's one notch below them looking in the camera and telling you, hey, did you notice this? Like Dora the Explorer trying to tell you who the killer was. So it's on the nose, extremely on the nose. But it leans into the comedy aspect with that. But at the same time, you feel it. Like, you don't feel the independence of a horror that is funny. And it needs that in order to kind of work better like that. So it doesn't stand on its own as a horror, but as a satire, it's pretty good. So it's best viewed knowing that. I often say don't know anything about these movies if you really care. But this one, it's better to know that it's funny. And if you know it's funny, like you do now, then put it on at your sleepover and put it on at your birthday party and laugh along with it. But for just sitting down to watch a horror movie, it's not quite what you want it to be. Okay, and then on the 19th, it was Swallowed from 2022. And this was when they had kicked around for a few years, and I had just heard little blurbs around it that said it was good, but they said, like, oh, you have to be able to handle it. And the quote was, can you stomach it? If you can stomach it, then it's for you. And haha, now I watch it, I get the pun. Because the goal of this is it's a kind of a drug deal gone bad, where two friends are kind of thrust into this drug deal immediately, and they have to swallow condoms full of worms. And what the worms do is they hatch eggs, and they make you high. They bite you, and that's your drug. So why are they smuggling them inside their bodies when they have to go 50 feet, maybe? I don't understand. But there's something about temperature. Like, they have to be kept at a certain temperature for a certain amount of time, so you can chalk it up to that. I like this. This is a good movie. It's well made. It's weird. It's tense. And it has a lot of good, like, claustrophobic moments in there. Moments play out really long in this movie. Because there's just 3 acts to it. It's a really simple 3-act structure. It's just, here's these people, here's what they thrust into, here's the predicament they're in, and then here's how we survive it. It's just boom, boom, boom. But they're very drawn out in a good way, because the acting is really good, and the fear is real, because this is a real scenario in modern times that I feel like people can get invested in. I personally don't go on drug deals all the time, but in this scenario, I could see falling into it. It could happen. It's one of those happenstances that are very terrifying too. If I was in this position, I would be fucking mortified to have a condom full of worms in my belly, and what that means and what I have to do now. And then going afoul of evil Mark Patton at the end isn't very fun either. And shout out to Mark Patton as well, making his triumphant horror return, maybe the first time since Nightmare on Elm Street 2, playing this sauntering, oddly confident, flamboyant gangster. Just a wild performance from Mark Patton, and one of the last things I expected to see in 2025 was him returning to this genre, because it treated him so poorly the last time he was around. So a quality film, made very grounded, in a grounded manner. It feels disgusting at times, and it feels very uncomfortable, but that's what good horror does. It makes you feel weird, and it makes you feel out of place, and it makes you want to see people overcome these obstacles. So it's good. It's gross, and it's sometimes very funny, and sometimes very scary, because it does build on this dread and this ominous feeling to it. So well worth it. Well worth the attempt at it. I don't think that ruins it for you to tell you all these things, because again, the movie is made in the beats, and it's made in these moments. So if you're in on it, you're going to feel it. If not, you're going to check out and you're going to look at your goddamn phone for too long. But if it hooks you, then it'll work. It works really well for being grounded and good. So next would be Dollface, which I did do a whole other video on, talking about how fucking ridiculous Dollface is. So you can listen to that separately if you like. And then after that was Carnival of Souls from 1962. And I watched this as an episode of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs, because I'm still catching up on those from the last season. And I've never seen this. This is a classic for a reason, though. It's the one feature film made by Herc Harvey, and it has all these hallmarks that would come back from other more established and famous films going forward, notably Night of the Living Dead, to copy the idea of like lurching ghouls that are coming after you in the dead of night. And it also plays with the idea of like, what is reality, what is brain synapse, what is life mean to you, why are you clinging to it, and there's a whole bunch of different theories and ideology on what this movie means and what it's trying to say. There's descriptors about sexuality, there's descriptors about just life itself and what it means and why you would fight for it, and what should it be viewed as a celebration, should it be viewed as a chore. There's a lot of analysis for it because at its core it's very simple. It's just a very simple story of a woman surviving a car wreck and then coming out different, coming out detached and disconnected, and people trying to relate to her in different ways, and them not understanding why she won't, and her not understanding why she won't, and trying to put it all back together. And that's something that's deeply profound for 1962. That was not being approached, that was not being discussed, that was not being analyzed to the nth degree like it is now. And I don't know how much of that was intentional or not. I feel like it was meant to be a simple story that has become timeless because people latch onto it for their own unique reasons, and they see pieces of themselves in this. If you're struggling with your sexuality, you'll identify with that. If you're struggling with your life reasoning, you'll identify with that. If you're struggling with your place in the world, you'll see that too. There's a lot going on to it because it is very relatable. It's very sensible, and it's like a universal truth going on throughout it. So for a movie, that's profound to be able to do. Intentionally or not, I don't care. The fact that it can do it is pretty amazing with that ideology. So for that alone, it's well worth your time. And it's also beautiful. This thing is picturesque, beautiful in terms of how it's shot. And it's on battered, ugly, black and white film stock. And it's public domain. I did not watch the pretty Criterion Collection version. This is the battered drive-in print that Joe Bob Briggs got a hold of because it's cheaper. And it transcends it. It does not matter. It does not matter that it's a beat-up, ugly, free movie, because it's still a great example of how you can take so much from it when it's just up there to be viewed like this. This is one of those ones that you could talk about for hours and you could dissect like that. And I love movies like that. They turn on your attention span, they turn on your brain, and they let you do the work. And if you are interested in it and you are creative about it, you'll paint an amazing picture for it. If you're not, you won't give a shit. But I did. I liked it quite a bit. And I will revisit it because it's one of those ones where I feel like you'll see other pieces to it too, which is really cool. I like the way that it has different levels to it. Not all the films do that, but this one does. And it also has probably one of the best found areas to film on and everything. Just happenstance. Herc Harvey happened by this just dilapidated ruins of salt air in Utah, which at one time was this beautiful resort, and now it was just the lake had receded far enough so there was no beach. The dance floor had been abandoned. It just looked decayed and destroyed. And it's the perfect place you would have souls of the damned gather to try to emulate humanity for. It's just perfect in terms of the setting and the visualizations of what message it's trying to portray. But again, then you get to fill in the blanks on all this stuff. So what a really nice film that hopefully people give more credit to and more attention to, because it's one of those ones that could easily get overlooked for two reasons. One, you would say oh, this is just a movie from the 60s, who cares? Or, oh, this is just a public domain movie, that's why nobody likes it, who cares? Or, oh, this has been done before, or it's been done since and been done better, so who cares? But no, this one matters, the original matters, and it's well worth seeking out. And then finally, on the 28th, I guess I knew to pair it together with Carnival of Souls, even though I didn't know to, was the Autopsy of Jane Doe. Again, another episode of The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs. This one was not as beneficial to watch on that episode, though, for the first time, as Carnival of Souls was, because Carnival of Souls was brimming with all this fact and terminology and background that I thought helped. I thought it made it more poignant feeling and added to the gravitas of it. The Autopsy of Jane Doe is better watching with absolutely nothing going forward. And this was my first time seeing it, but it was also on a Walpurgisnacht themed episode of The Last Drive-In, which is about witch torture. So I think it's easy to deduct what is going on at the heart of the Autopsy of Jane Doe. Knowing that, though, it's still a great movie. It's still really well made for what it is. I think the second act kind of loses some steam, though, I will say that. And then it almost wants to become like a slasher icon film in the very third act. But I love that beginning. The beginning of it, the first act, and then some, is incredible. When they're actually doing the autopsy, to be able to see it play out like that. The storytelling from Brian Cox and Emile Hirsch is just like pitch perfect. Like, it's really well done. I kind of wanted to see that play out longer. But then you get into the meat of their story and why they're there and all your metaphor and allegory, which is why it's a movie. Like, I understand that. But at the same time, I liked the storytelling more from that aspect. And I don't know how much further you could go with it and still keep me on the hook as long as they did. So maybe they were wise to have me wanting more with it, because they don't overstay their welcome. But then at the same time, it's the scenario they're in that makes me want to go back to where they were. And then they do. They end up circling back around. So is that just a device? Maybe. It certainly worked. It certainly worked for me. But because of it, it just made me like the style more of the beginning. You need all three parts, though, to really tell the story. So it makes total sense why it exists like that. I guess I just happen to prefer the beginning part to it. But still, really good. A good mystery, one that unfolds, one that's admittedly cheap, but not really constricted by that, because the whole thing does take place in 2 or 3 rooms. It is a very claustrophobic and confined film. But my only gripe on it is when it tries to go beyond it. When it tries to be like a slasher film all of a sudden for a little bit. And I don't know that I like that. I like the mystery, and I like the way it kind of unfurls itself, but I don't like the left turn they take kind of in the third act. I get it. It makes sense. And depending on, because there's another question they ask in there, and depending on which side of the fence you are on with it, you will like that twist maybe a little more or a little less. But it's not the same tone. I kind of would have preferred it to go down that path a little bit more, or come back to it fully, as opposed to this other veer off. But still great, well made, and that beginning scene. If you're not hooked by the beginning 20 minutes, then it's just not for you. But if you are, I think you'll be willing to let it take you wherever it wants to go. It did me. I'm not sorry for a second that it did for me, and I think it's well worth your time. So there it is, February 2025, everything I watched on Letterboxd, condensed. Yeah, that was fun. Maybe we'll do it again sometime.